Thank you for joining us today. My name's Shannon Stone. I'm from Contra Costa Superior Court. I'm your host today, and I am happy to welcome you to Fostering an Innovative Court, and I'm pleased to introduce our two distinguished speakers. First, we have Associate Justice Marsha Slough, a justice with the Court of Appeal, California Court of Appeal for the 4th Appellate District. Before her appointment to the Court of Appeal, she was a judge for the San Bernardino Superior Court.
Yeah.
Who are well represented here today. Last of her leadership roles at the Superior Court was as presiding judge before her appointment. I am also pleased, and I would like to acknowledge Justice Slough is also very involved in court leadership for the judicial branch, including currently serving as the chief or the chair of the Court Technology Committee and as an advisory member on the Judicial Council. I'm also pleased to introduce Robert Oyung, who's currently our Chief Operating Officer at the Judicial Council of California. Prior to joining the Judicial Council, he served as the Chief Information Officer for the Santa Clara Superior Court, and prior to that had a very distinguished career in the private technology sector. Please join me in welcoming our two speakers.
Thank you very much, and let me make sure, can you hear me okay? Don't want to have to yell at you, I'll try not to yell at you. And it's nice to see so many family and friends from my prior court, the Superior Court of San Bernardino County, and actually to see all of you here this afternoon, it is. So looking at the title of our presentation, Fostering an Innovative Court, can actually, I think, cause an experience of cognitive dissonance. I mean, a sense of real incongruency. I mean, on the one hand, you have innovation, and then on the other hand, you have the courts. And it doesn't seem like they really meld well together, and it seems like a real confluence of conflicting cultures. Because we think of the courts of law and of jurisprudence as contemplative. Its strength lies in its predictability, and its endurance is founded in the brick and mortar. And we think of the culture of innovation as creative, of fast-paced, of change, instinctive and intuitive, something that seems a little bit more fun. So the idea of fostering or nurturing or promoting innovations within the court in and of itself can leave one in a state of dis-ease and discomfort. But Rob and I are here today as incremental evidence of the fact that you can merge these two cultures together, and you can do it successfully. So often I think we tend to think about innovation in the realm of technology. But really, it's not limited to technology. To simplify it from my simplistic version, I think innovation is really about allowing ourselves to think differently, to view business and business models from a different perspective. See if I can, there we go. How businesses operate today is changing all around us. People think that the iPhone was a new innovation when it was first announced, but really it contained the same inner workings as our previously used PDAs. Apple just packaged and integrated its parts and used intuitive design and focused on the user experience. Similar examples of repackaging and integrating to our experience are listed actually on this page. We can now use our PDA to call Uber for a ride. We can overshare our day with our friends and families with Facebook. We can buy stuff on Alibaba, and we can rent a place to stay through Airbnb. So all of this work is done in a totally different way from what we've been used to in the past. And because of that, we, the consumer, are now expecting businesses to deliver their goods to us in this same or similar way. So it's so different for us. but it's also so different for the businesses. Now, when these companies are having such a huge impact on the expectations of the consumer, and I stand here and I talk about them, I don't mean to imply that we should do court business like Uber. We shouldn't be able to dial in and get a judge on the line. It's just that these business models are changing our expectations within the court. And it's changing the expectations of the court users. People, myself included, want access online, on my mobile device. I want it to be convenient, fast, and intuitive. We want things to happen fast and easy. By way of example, when I arrived at the hotel today, before I even got situated in my room, on my iWatch, I had a list of where I could go to lunch nearby. That's what we're beginning to experience and expect. And that's what our court users are beginning to experience and expect. And yet, too often, that's the reality that we are giving to our court users. Long lines, complicated, seemingly unintelligent forms, and stacks of paper to complete and internally to process. The thing is, we just really aren't as patient as we used to be in the past. And these old business practices that leave us in line with papers to complete and long lines, I fear, is running a risk of people bypassing the judicial process. Because we want it now, because we want it fast, if I have to stand in that line and I have to complete a form that I can't really understand, it may take too long. It may be too expensive, and I may not even understand it, so to heck with it. Just forget it. This byproduct of bypassing the courts is counterproductive to our Constitution. The principle of justice is and should be that it is available to us all. So how do we foster innovation in the courts? How do we move forward to meet the ever-changing expectations? Well, I hope not like that. The middle one, strategic innovation process, really makes me nervous, actually. Who wants to follow any of these models of change? And we've all seen them. And quite frankly, the judiciary itself is probably a model very similar to this. And we must move away from this type of model and more towards innovation in this fashion. Whoop. Maybe. There. More like that. And we know this. We come up with our best ideas, we let our guard down, when we let our guard down, and when we allow ourselves, and most importantly, others that work with us and for us, to think freely and to think with a sense of calm and allow for viewing the world through an open and guarded lens, unguarded lens. Our issues, our problems, our roadblocks seem so different when we can think freely and not worry, not be afraid of what is my supervisor going to think with this nutty idea that I'm coming up with. This is the model of innovation. Rob, I'm messing up on my progress here.
Here you go.
There we go.
All right,
I
great.
think I'm going to turn it over to Rob, and he'll innovate for you.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about why there's not more innovation and why it's hard. So a lot of people basically have reasons why they can't innovate. So one of them is that it's really risky, right? So judicial branch in particular is not what you would think of as a risk-taking organization, right? So the judicial branch tends to be driven by policies, by rules, not being known for taking a lot of risks. Another issue in terms of why people say that there's not more innovation is because they say that they're too busy, right? They don't have enough time to innovate. They're busy with their day-to-day workload. Also, people get comfortable with the way that they've been doing things, and so they're resistant to change, and they really like the processes that have been around since the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, right? And so it's very comforting to them. There's also rules that have been just as old that dictate the processes for which we adjudicate cases, and so there's not a whole lot of flexibility there. And then finally, people basically say, well, we can't have a lot of innovation because we don't have enough money. And so these are all reasons or excuses that people give in terms of why there's not more innovation. Innovation is actually so difficult, somebody's actually written a book about why it's difficult to innovate. So this is Clayton Christensen's book. He is a professor at Harvard, and so he wrote a book called The Innovator's Dilemma, and basically talked about the fact that historically companies and people have innovated by making things better, cheaper, and faster, and can't get out of that cycle. He came up with this idea of disruptive innovation in terms of really looking at things from a different way. So let me give you an example of disruptive innovation. So in 1984, Hewlett-Packard introduced the HP LaserJet. At the time, the quality was pretty high. The speed was 8 pages per minute. The cost was, believe it or not, $3,500 for a business, and it was black and white. So in 1988, 4 years after that, they were thinking about how to innovate and how to improve the HP LaserJet. So they basically thought about, well, let's make it better, faster, cheaper, right? So they were thinking, let's increase the quality, let's increase the speed, and then let's reduce the cost. Instead, they did something else. What they did was they introduced in 1988 the HP DeskJet, and it was totally opposite from making it better, faster, cheaper. In fact, the quality was low, the speed was actually slower, the cost was less, but it did print in color. So instead of making it better, faster, cheaper, they actually made it worse, slower, and cheaper. So why do you think that they did that? Something you can build on. Something you can build on? Yeah, what else? Yeah, totally different market, right? So at the time, everybody was in the business printing market. Nobody had tapped into the home printing market. And so HP saw an opportunity there and introduced the DeskJet. They realized that the home user did not need as high quality as a laser printer. They didn't really need to have it really, really fast, but they did need a price that was affordable. I don't know about you, but even now, $995 seems pretty expensive for a printer. But at the time, that was the price point where they were actually able to get into the home market. And so that was a disruptive innovator, right? Disruptive innovation. It wasn't better, faster, cheaper. It was opposite, but it actually got into a market that was untapped. And so that disrupted the printing industry at that time. Now, disruption cannot happen all the time. And in fact, if we look now at 2018, it's very, very hard to innovate. And what's happened is that HP has now fallen back into this idea of making it better, faster, cheaper, right? So the LaserJet is high quality, it's faster. It's all the way down to $130 now. For a HP DeskJet, quality is higher, much faster, price is down to $100, and it prints in color, but also it scans, it faxes, and it prints photos as well. So again, this disruptive innovation is very, very difficult. And so you can see, even with a company that's been able to actually disrupt the printer business, years down the road, it's finding a hard way to become even more innovative. So innovation is not only just technology as well, right? So innovation can happen in many different ways. And innovation doesn't necessarily mean doing something cool and high tech. It could be low tech, but it needs to be different, needs to add value. So here is an example of an innovation that there's a person named Jack Maddens from Open Cities, and he had a friend whose grandmother had difficulty using the remote control. And so his innovation was basically to mask off all of the things that were irrelevant and highlight those main things. So highlight on and off. Instead of using strange jargon, he used undo. And then, a quick reference of PBS, because that was her favorite channel, 522, is right there in front, right? So this is an innovation that actually simplifies the user experience, right? It's very, very low tech, as you can see. It's not very elegant, but it actually works very, very well. So innovation can happen in many different areas. So there's been some research done on innovation as well. And so what we're going to do is spend the first part of this discussion talking a little bit about innovation in general, and then we'll give you some specific examples of how we're innovating in California. So there's some psychology research that has been done around what drives a person to innovate at work. And so this research basically grouped things in 5 different categories. Personality, so are you born innovative? The demographic, so what kind of education have you had? What's your tenure at work? Motivation, so are you self-motivated? Does your manager motivate you to be innovative? What type of work are you doing? What's the characteristics of your job? So is it complex? Is it simple? Do you have some autonomy in terms of how you do the work? And then finally, the context. So do you have a positive climate? Do you have resources? Do you have your supervisor's support? And so what they found actually is that in terms of what drives personal innovation, your role expectation is the #1 driver. So if you are expected to be innovative in your drive, that's the #1 factor in ensuring that somebody actually is innovative. So you tell them that it's part of your job to be innovative, and that actually drives people to be more innovative. Creative self-efficacy is another driver. So if the person wants to be innovative as well, that's also a high driver. Having complex jobs and being autonomous so that you can decide how you actually deliver on your work also drives towards a innovative individual. Interestingly enough, if you look all the way down at the bottom, some people say that you really need, at your head of your organization, the top of your company, you need to have an inspirational, visionary leader. Well, actually, the next to the last item is that transformational leadership. So that really has no indication of how an individual is going to be innovative or not. So just because you have a flashy leader doesn't necessarily mean that every person in the organization is going to be innovative. And then finally, if you look at tenure is even worse. The either length of time, whether you're a short timer or a long timer, has no effect about whether or not you're innovative. Really, it's about, are you expected to be innovative at work, and do you have the self-motivation to be innovative? So let's go down, or actually I guess go up one more level and say, so we've looked at an individual, now let's look at a work group. So what makes a work group innovative? So there's been research done in this area as well. And they've identified 5 major items that really encourage work groups to innovate. And the first one is to ensure that there is excellent external and internal communication, to make sure that you're openly communicating, you've got a free communication of ideas going in and out of the team, that you've got a strong vision that you are headed towards. So if you have a clear goal, a clear vision, especially one that's inspiring, that drives a work group to be more innovative. Making sure that your leader is supportive of that is also important, and that you've got focus on tasks, and that you've got shared interdependent goals. So everybody is moving in the same direction towards the same vision. And so that's what tends to drive a work group to be innovative. And so then if we go up one more level, if we can, there we are, and we look at an organization and see what makes an organization innovative, there's a company called IDEO, and IDEO is a design company. And so they look at how companies can better design their products and services for ease of use. And they've done some studies around what makes innovative organizations, right? So we started at the individual level, the work group level, and now at a full organizational level. And you're starting to see some themes now. in terms of making sure that there's a clear purpose, that there's a clear, inspiring vision or reason for the company or the organization to exist. One thing we haven't touched on yet is experimentation. So I talked a little bit about people saying that innovation is risky, right? And so experimentation and encouraging experimentation, especially at an organizational level, is very, very important because we need people to feel comfortable that not everything is going to work and to allow a little bit of failure. You need to mitigate some of that risk so that you're not putting resources or the organization at overall failure, but a little bit of experimentation and learning from each experiment is the most important thing. And then making sure people are empowered to do their work. Looking out beyond the boundaries is another theme that I think is important because there's this concept of interdisciplinary solution, examining the solutions. And so if you are working on a particular issue, let's say it's a finance issue, and you only have finance people looking at it, you don't get as rich of a solution as if you had an office clerk, maybe somebody from IT, somebody from management come in and provide that input. So getting feedback and input from different areas really actually makes the solution richer. And that then moves towards this collaborative environment as well. So making sure that you're encouraging those people from different disciplines to come together and work together. And finally, with the experimentation and refining things ongoing to improve it over time, that tends to make an organization innovative. So you've got this theme of now not innovation as something you do, you have a theme of now innovation as a culture, right? So it's a culture of innovation that we need to think about and a culture of innovation that we should promote throughout the courts. So we've seen what motivates an individual, a work group, and a organization, and it all really comes down to setting that vision and setting that culture. That's one of the main points that we want to leave you with. And so as one example of that, we have the Texas courts. Let's see. We have the Texas courts who is working on a dashboard for their judicial officers. And so the idea was that judges need to have better information when they are setting bonds. And so what the Texas courts did was they prototyped a screen. And so you can't see the screen, but the whole point is that they basically put something together very, very quickly. It didn't connect into their case management systems. It wasn't fully featured. It was just the look and feel so that they could work with their judicial officers to see if the layout was right, to see if it had the right information. And then the culture was set to basically say that, well, something is better than nothing. And we know that this is not going to be the permanent solution, but it's a start. And then we'll innovate and we'll incrementally make it better over time. And it wasn't just the IT people who were working on this, but the judicial officers, the administrators came in, provided that interdisciplinary input to make the solution richer. And then finally, what they're going to be doing is they're actually going to be gathering data to validate the direction and validate that what they're doing is effective. And so that culture of innovation really sets up some expectations around risk-taking, collaborative nature, and the fact that we're not going to have a perfect solution, but we'll have something, and then we'll innovate on top of that to improve it over time. Okay? So then finally, other things that we can do for innovation, there's freebies, so things we can do with no resources or no money, and there's feebies, right, where if you did have some money, you could pay for it. So in terms of freebies, the most important thing is really promoting this culture of innovation, right? You saw that if you tell an individual their job is to innovate, that has a huge impact on whether or not they're innovative. And so there's things that you can do for free to really make sure that that happens. Collaboration and getting this cross-interdisciplinary collaboration is important as well. And making sure that people have the time to innovate, right? Give them also a little bit of air cover to let them make some mistakes, let them experiment. If you do actually have some money and you want to, look at Freebies, you could actually set up an innovation center, right? So with people, some resources, let people try some things out. You can also establish some funding for some experiments, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go into some of the examples from California. So I'll hand it off to Justice Slough to talk a little bit more about what we're doing in California around innovation.
Thank you, Rob. So as we started out, we talked about people's expectations are changing, and we better change with them. And Rob has touched on the fact that you do that from a culture, having a culture of innovation as being critical. So in California, we have learned that innovation isn't just a different way of doing business, it's just downright necessary. Honestly, to steal somebody else's quote, it takes a village to innovate. If you look at the California judicial branch on the screen here, it's the largest court system in the nation. Los Angeles County alone, and Sonorio Gata is here, he can tell you, has almost 500 judges, and they serve a population of 10 million people. And then way up on the top right of our map is the county of Alpine, and it has 2 judges, and they serve a population of about 1,000 people. So obviously what works in LA is not going to work in Alpine for a myriad of reasons. And yet if LA chose to stay siloed, and thank goodness they do not, and just stay within the LA frame of mind, or Alpine did the same thing, then I think we lose our sensitivity to our differences. And we become constrained, and we become rigid, and we lose our ability to innovate together as a culture of innovators. So, did anybody see our Chief Justice, Justice Tani Kantil Sakaui, this morning? Okay, so she sets the path for us. She's dynamic. And this is her vision, Access 3D. She's keenly aware of our challenges that we have within our state judicial system, and she's equally progressive in her directives that she gives to us as a branch. And she frequently calls us out to foster innovations within the branch as a whole and within our courts individually. And I think this is most clearly demonstrated by her Access 3D vision. She believes that access must be physical. We have to have safe, secure, accessible courts. It should also be remote. We should have the ability to conduct business when we can, online, with our mobile devices. And utmost importance, it must be equal. We have to serve all languages, abilities, and needs. So, how do we do that in such a big, diverse state? Well, speaking from the technology standpoint, we support this Access 3D vision of our chief, starting with strategic planning. From the technology standpoint, we know what our branch goals are, which the business goals are on the left side of that chart there. And those branch-wide goals inform our goals for technology, and our goals for technology in turn inform our technology initiatives. Now, each one of these goals, business goals on the left side, are married to a set of guiding documents. The branch strategic plan, the technology strategic plan, and the technology tactical plan, all of which have to be updated, reviewed, and to assure that we are working together to accomplish our initiatives. And we do that in technology in a phrase that Rob brought to us, working as an IT community. In fact, this has become such a deep-seated phrase that it's the automatic default response for us. We automatically reach out across the branch to the trial courts, to the courts of review, to the presiding judges, the CEOs, the judicial council staff, and others to work together. Those are the circles around there. We leverage everybody's experience together to inform our work streams. And it is our work streams is what I will call the boots on the ground. They're the ones actually putting into play our initiatives. The work streams really help, approaching it from its work stream model really helps us to share the workload and also to gain support and buy-in for our initiatives on the front end, as opposed to somebody somewhere in Sacramento or San Francisco having an idea and then calling on a couple of people to come and implement this idea, and then it's implemented and now we go out and try to sell it, that this is the best idea. No, we start from the ground and work up. Another example of leveraging the community is when we bring together our software developers from across the different courts to share their ideas and best practices. Now, don't try to read the slide. It'll be bad for your eyes. I know you can't see it. But I just did want to emphasize another area where we've worked as a community. In August of last year, we convened a technology summit. We had space for about 140 people, and because we're a small group here, and don't tell anybody, but we actually oversold. We had more than we had space for. We actually had to turn people away, and that's judges, court staff, and technologists, CEOs, etc. It was a huge success. And I think it was a huge success because we reached out across disciplines. We reached out to everyone, inside and outside the branch. For example, the Chief Innovation Officer for eRepublic came and spoke about exponential government. If you don't think you need to innovate without hearing that, you hear that, you know you better get your shoes on and get out and innovate. We also had one of the CIOs from 20th Century Fox to come in and talk about the private perspective of IT. And we had a CIO from North Carolina talk about data analytics. And of course, we had our chief speak to us as well. This theme of branch-wide innovation, of Access 3D, working as an IT community, the Technology Summit, is also evidenced by our Futures Commission. Now, this is not a technology initiative. This is an initiative of our Chief Justice, who called, again, across broad spectrum of people to get together, establish committees in all kinds of areas within the judicial branch, and come back and report on what should our branch look like, not next year and not 5 years from now, but what should it look like out into the future? And she was very generous. She gave us 2 years to accomplish this. Well, we did. We accomplished it. And again, I think we did because we worked together. And not only did the committees and the subcommittees work and have a diverse inclusion on who was in the individual groups, but at various stages they reached out to the community and held hearings to hear from the public of what do you want your court to look like into the future. So out of that commission, there were a multitude of recommendations. And the chief has focused us now on 4 primary directives to move towards seeing if they are indeed feasible. I'll run through them very quickly. We could spend the whole time on each and every one of them. One is to change our method of how we handle traffic citations in California, which is handled in the criminal court, and handle minor traffic infractions more in a civil model. Another is to add a intermediary stage or an interim stage in civil cases. Right now we have limited cases and unlimited civil cases. The limited are up to 50,000 and anything and below. The unlimited are 50,000 and above. So add a third tier of civil type cases that would have a jurisdictional amount of $250,000. Again, in a way of thinking about how to streamline our methods of litigating and managing all of our civil case types. She's also having us focus on how to improve help for self-represented litigants, which is a huge issue not only in California, but I know across this country. Finally, expansion in technology in the courts. We're moving towards two or three pilot projects. One is a pilot project to allow remote appearances by parties, counsel, and witnesses for most non-criminal court proceedings. Another is a pilot project using voice-to-text language interpretation services at court filing and court self-help counters. And another is a pilot project using intelligent chat technology to provide information and self-help services. So, another example of innovation in action, in 2016, Governor Brown actually included, as part of the judicial branch budget, an innovation fund. It's the first time, to my knowledge, that that has ever occurred. There was $12 million allocated for innovations in collaborative courts, $8 million for family, juvenile, and self-help programs, and $5 million for other efficiencies. Again, I could stand here for over an hour and talk about the process that we went through to award these grants. There were over 118 applicants from 42 of our 58 courts. Ultimately, 52 grants were awarded to 29 courts. And what's really interesting is to watch these courts begin to work on their grant program, but not just on their own, but how they're reaching out to other courts and leveraging the work and the project that they have before them. That's really rewarding to see, again, that IT community, that culture of working together in action. Some of the innovation examples are innovating in the Veterans Treatment Court, human trafficking, homeless court, as well as a self-help avatar. So, innovation, like all of life, has to go through its incubation process. From a vision to an ultimate execution, and then hopefully to successful duplication and improvements. This orderly and sometimes painfully process, and sometimes just downright painful, really does work. And when you stop and you look back at some of the progress that has been made in a very short time, it is really, truly rewarding. So, some of the things that are currently in their metamorphosis are an ability to pay calculator, a plain language online interviews to facilitate document assembly, working towards a cloud-based disaster recovery program, and others. These are innovations that the various CEOs, CIOs, PJs, others within our branch have been working on together and building and growing. And again, it will be really fun to look back a year or so out and see the work in action. So how did we get there? The left side of this chart shows kind of how I think we were before we had a technology strategic plan. There are a lot of courts doing a lot of things, and a lot of them were very good things. And a lot of courts maybe duplicating what other courts were doing and not necessarily know that anybody was doing. And I think it kind of even created what I might call an unhealthy sense of competition. Well, about 3.5 years ago, through the IT community, we developed and the Judicial Council approved a technology strategic plan. And since that time, the right side of this chart shows how we move forward with technology initiatives in an orderly, together process, leveraging each other's experience, money, time, and again, getting the buy-in on the front end. But we don't want all of it to be in the arrows. We want outliers. We want courts that are trying their own thing, doing their own thing. That's not necessarily within our full strategic plan. But when we approach it in this fashion, what we do know is that when those courts try something, and if it works, they will bring it to others, and it will be leveraged, and it will help us to do what our ultimate goal is, really, and that's to provide better access to the people that we serve. Rob?
Yep. Great, thank you. All right, so we heard a little bit about the work that's happening in California, and if you think back to the research that was done, right, when people are most innovative is when you tell them that they need to innovate. And so if you think about the innovation grants, the Futures Commission's work, that was basically telling people they need to innovate. And then we pretty much were able to actually get resources to support that as well, so that people were able to do some experimentation. At the same time, Justice Slough talked a little bit about our strategic plan and the vision, and that was another thing that the research showed, which was you need to have a shared direction in order to foster that innovation. So I talked earlier about the fact that innovation is not only technology, but it's also around process. And so we actually have this idea of a career development model, which is a little bit different. So there's a process that we're implementing, that I'm implementing with my team, around how to manage your own career. And so the first idea is that you need to know your personal branding. So that's a concept that most people are familiar with, and we emphasize that you shouldn't wait around for your manager to tell you, what to do. Think about what you want to be known for and be able to promote that, and that is your own personal brand. The second idea is that if you want to be something, you act as if. So if you want to be a great public speaker, act as if you are a great public speaker. What do? Well, you would go to training, you would go to events, you would practice being a public speaker. And so acting as if is another way that an individual can take control over their own development. And then finally, the third component of this career development model is something called auditioning. And this is more for the managers than an individual. But the idea is that a manager should look for opportunities for employees to audition for different roles. So if somebody wants to be a good program manager, don't put them on the biggest project for the organization with huge amounts of resources. Look for a small project that that person can manage, or maybe a small task that they can coordinate, and let them audition for that. Give them a chance to try it out. And so this concept of auditioning encapsulates some of this concept of experimentation, low risk, letting people try things out, and learning from that. And so auditioning is another idea of, maybe you think that you have a particular role that you're trying to fill on a project team. And you don't know who could potentially fill that. Maybe what you do is you hold a small workshop where the skills that you're looking for, whether it's facilitating a discussion, presenting, you can have the people who you're considering lead some of those activities and see how they do, right? So basically you're auditioning them for that bigger role. So this is an idea that we're exploring with our staff to see if we can encourage people to basically manage their career in a different way, and have the supervisors and managers give them some tools like auditioning to be able to try things out. So another opportunity is around some partnership that we're doing with Texas. So we talked a little bit about having people come in, collaborate. So California and Texas are actually partnering in investigating a digital evidence management solution. So this is a cross-state collaboration. We're leveraging diverse expertise from both of the states. We feel that we can work smarter together. So this is a term that Sonori actually coined, where together we're actually much smarter. We can do better work. And so we're also looking at sharing a secured platform potentially for this solution as well. So having a couple states come together to collaborate and innovate together makes potentially a much better solution. If you remember in the beginning of the presentation, I talked a little bit about this remote control and simplifying that. We're looking at that in other areas as well. So if we look at the presence, the web presence of the California courts, if we can get there. Here we are. Okay, so this is the website for the California courts. It was. Oops. Can we bring that back up, please?
I feel so much better when Rob has problems.
I just manage technology. I don't make it, so it's that's the. So anyway, you saw the California Courts website, which is a sort of a standard government website. Lots of text. It has kind of this government feel to it, and so we're looking at an opportunity to try to innovate around this as well. And so one of the ways that we're looking at doing this is incorporating more user-centric design and making it a little bit, giving it a little bit of a warmer feel. And so you'll see this mock-up, which has a totally different feel from the previous one, has more people there. You can't see the bottom, but the buttons on the bottom are more action-oriented, right? So more geared towards what a member of the public would want to do. Declare your military status, change your name. So we're looking at ways to innovate to make the overall experience a little bit more easier. So another area for innovation is around an example from Los Angeles, and this is Gina. Gina is an avatar for LA Superior's Court traffic, and I think you'll probably need to run it from the back. And so she'll speak in multiple languages. So if you can click and start the video, we can hear Gina. So you'll see her up at the top. And what will happen is somebody visiting the traffic site will click on her, and then that will open up, and she'll talk.
Our traffic assistance currently provides help in English, Spanish, Chinese, Korean, Vietnamese, and Armenian.
So let's pick English.
Hi, my name is Gina. I can help you to complete your online traffic transactions. Depending on your situation, here are the services you may qualify for. Would you like to continue? Please select yes or no. I need help with a service that is not offered online. Example, fix a ticket.
So let's go back. And so I mentioned that Gina is multilingual, so let's see her in
Hola,
Spanish.
me llamo Gina. Le puedo ayudar a completar sus transacciones de tráfico en línea.
So she speaks in Spanish and the text is in Spanish. We'll see Chinese.
您好，我的名字是 Gina， 我可以帮助您完成在线交通交易。
Okay, so let's go back to English and take a look at her script.
Hi,
there.
my name is
So we'll
Gina.
say, let's continue going forward.
Do you have your ticket information? Please select yes, no.
Yes, we have our information.
Please wait while I direct you to the online services page.
So now she'll actually take you to the page where you can perform your transaction. So rather than just giving you
To
information.
use our online services, you must check the I have read, understand and agree to the terms of this user agreement box and click on the continue button.
Okay, so that's Gina. Gina is the traffic avatar from LA, and so she'll talk to you in multiple languages. She'll go through her script. She'll walk you through the process that you need to go through. That's one innovation. Another innovation is Courtney. So Courtney is a chatbot from Contra Costa Superior Court. She is the virtual assistant, and she differs from Gina in that Courtney understands natural language. So you saw that Gina, you're clicking yes, no, different choices. For Courtney, you can actually type in your questions, and she'll use machine learning to get smarter and smarter. So the question is, well, where do I start? And so we can have our mobile app here, and we'll say, I have an issue with small claims, so you can start typing your message. Where do I file my claim? Gina will come back and says, here's some information. I can find a location. What's your location? You can type that in free form. It'll bring you a map, give you some resources. And so you see you're interacting in plain language. You're just asking questions. And so Courtney will understand that and route you to the appropriate place and then bring information that she thinks is relevant to the question that you're asking. So that's Courtney as a virtual assistant with machine learning, and just gets better and better. The more she interacts with people, the better her answers get. And the reason for that is because she is basically storing all of that information, and people behind the scenes are basically then looking at what people are asking for and then routing them to the appropriate, branching them to the appropriate resources. Not only is Courtney available on a mobile app, but you can embed her into a web page as well. So just like Gina, as you're going through the web page, you can click and find some help from Courtney. So Courtney right now is a prototype, not yet live. And so finally, what happens with Courtney is that, as I mentioned, she gets smarter and smarter as you interact with her. And so you can say, you know, how do I serve small claims? I filed my SC100 form. How do they know I filed a claim against them? All that goes into the machine learning engine model and will then detect that, oh, this person has a small claims issue. Let's route them to the appropriate resources. So we're looking at this type of technology and these types of innovations to help the self-help experience for people who are coming to the courts to make it more friendly, easier to use, right? So if we go all the way back to the beginning where Justice Slough talked about people's expectations with interacting with online services, they want them to be easy and intuitive. So solutions like Gina and Courtney help the court become more and more intuitive, easier to use. And these are the types of innovations that are not necessarily making things better, faster, cheaper, right? But really making the courts more accessible, more inviting. So those were some of the examples that we had from California, and I'll hand it back to Justice Slough to summarize the things that we had discussed.
So, just briefly, we know that we have to come from a culture of innovation. That's really important. We have to establish that culture of innovation, and we have to set a vision, and we do that together. We do it from different perspectives. We have to encourage interdisciplinary solutions. As Rob mentioned earlier, we gain more when we invite those that aren't necessarily part of what you would typically think would be the solution, but bring people in from HR, bring people in from the courtroom, bring your clerks in and others in so that we can learn their perspectives and what is important for them. We have to be willing to experiment and encourage experimentation within our employees. And that kind of goes back to one of the first slides about what is our model of innovation. And that's doing it from a position of being calm and knowing that sometimes we will get it wrong. And that's okay. We'll regroup, we'll reshuffle, and we'll move forward. We have to be agile. We have to be willing to move away from systems that we're comfortable with to things that maybe make us a little bit uncomfortable for a period of time. And then again, we have to know when to move away because maybe it's not working. And I will say from my own personal perspective, I think one of the most important aspects on this chart in front of you is that we have to be people who are willing to learn from everything we do. And I think when we combine all of these, we truly can foster innovation in the court. As I stated earlier, it is rewarding, and you'll make a lot of good friends along the way. And from my personal opinion, really, in the big picture, it's the relationships that matter. And so we hope that you innovate in your courts, and we are here in any way to help you with ideas and solutions and energy. So thank you very much.
Great. So I think we have a little bit of time, just a few minutes. If anybody has questions, we're open to that. You'll have to raise your hand and get a mic because we are streaming so that people online can hear your questions. So any questions for us? No? Come on.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, let's wait for the mic.
Is Courtney multi-language, do you know?
Not right now. So there is a potential for Courtney to become multilingual. Right now, she only understands English text.
Okay, great, thank you.
Anything else? Yes, sir.
Sorry, what's the basic operating platform for Courtney? You know, like with IBM Watson and other.
Right. Okay, yeah. So Courtney actually is built on top of a set of different open source tools, actually. One of the key machine learning engines actually was recently purchased by Google, but they are making it still available sort of in the open source arena. And so it's built on open technologies. Okay. Any other questions?